welcome to this March 30, 2021 meeting of the Charlotte City Council Budget and Effectiveness Committee. Let's kick off as we usually do with a roll call. So, Ms. Isold.
Good afternoon, Julie. Mayor Pro Tem and serving at large as a committee member. Thank you.
Hi. Mr. Graham.
Good afternoon, Malcolm Graham, City Council District 2.
So Ms. Ajmira has advised me that she's not feeling well and won't be joining us today. And you say Ms. Johnson is unlikely to be on, or
Unlikely, yes.
unlikely because she's traveling, right?
Traveling, yes.
All right. Good. People in the room, please introduce themselves. Mr. Winston is on. Hey.
Hello, Braxton Winston, serving at large.
All right. That's it, right? So in the room.
Kelly Flannery, CFO.
Ryan Bergman, Budget Director.
Brent Cagle, City Manager's Office.
John Lewis, CATS.
Maria Sherman, CATS. Donata Jackson, Office of Constituent Services.
Marie Harris, Strategy and Budget.
Do we have anybody else, a staff member on the phone?
Yes, we do have staff online.
So staff online, please introduce yourselves.
Haley Gentry, Aviation.
Mike Hill, Aviation.
That's it. All right.
I'm sorry, Mike Hill, Aviation.
That's it, right? Everybody? Okay. So we have a good agenda today. An outlook for CATS. Actually, I think, Ryan, you're doing the overview of the agenda, aren't you? Why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Yep. So the first thing we'll do today is we'll talk about our final two enterprise funds. They'll give an outlook of the FY22 budget year. So we have CATS and then we have Aviation. And as a reminder, they will also give a condensed version of the presentation next week at the workshop. After that, Kelly will give a brief update on the debt financing calendar, similar to what she did last year. And then I will finish this up by giving a preview of next week's budget workshop agenda for your consideration.
First agenda item, which is the CATS outlook. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. With me today is also Blanche Sherman, who is our Chief Financial Officer for CATS. If we can advance to the next slide. One more, please. Thank you. It's been quite a year for CATS, as it has been for all city departments and the nation, dealing with the impacts and uncertainties associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. There were operational impacts that we had to deal with in terms of lost ridership and lost revenue and adjusting to the decrease in demand. There are also team member impacts as our employees and partners in the delivery of our service were also impacted by the pandemic and associated with family members and ensuring that we continued to provide the highest level of service. We adjusted our service to focus on the mobility needs of essential members of the community and life necessities of the broader community. We allowed data to drive our decisions regarding service and utilize best practices and CDC guidelines regarding the health and safety of our team members and our customers. During this, we continued to move strategic initiatives forward, and staff did a great job adjusting to the necessities of moving from a face-to-face environment to a virtual environment. We continue to move the CityLinks Gold Line Phase 2 forward and looking forward to its imminent opening later this spring, early summer. We continue to move forward with the preliminary planning and design of the Silver Line, and also an exciting initiative to convert our fleet in keeping with the Strategic Energy Action Plan, converting our fleet to battery electric buses according to the goals of the CEAP. We're excited to begin this conversion with a pilot program that we are working with Duke Energy to bring on 18 battery electric buses from various manufacturers, utilizing the benefit of a low-no federal grant that we receive that will help pay for the capital and operating of 6 of those vehicles, and CATS will acquire the other 12. This will enable us to pilot each of the available manufacturers of these buses in a real urban environment to get the necessary data on how battery electric buses in an urban, heavily used urban environment, and really get good data on the impact of this transition into new technology. This will enable us to inform, plan, and budget for the overall transition, and also enable us to continue to evaluate a creative proposal that we received from Duke Energy to partner with us in the conversion of our fleet. Next slide. As I've stated, the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted all areas of our operation. We've had significant ridership decreases. For several months early on during the pandemic, we suspended all fares to promote social distancing and maximize protection. We utilize both dual front and rear door entry and exits of our vehicles in order to continue to promote safe operations. And of course, there's the revenue reductions that we had planned for, and we are very fortunate to report that sales tax outperformed our estimations, but overall they were still lower than what we received the previous year. All of these had an impact on our revenue, and we were very nimble in making sure that our expenses kept in line with the revenue that we had. There was a lot of changes to service models, to the provision of service, and how we handled staffing to keep in line with that. Next slide. Of course, during all of this, the impact of the pandemic, we wanted to make sure that employee safety continued to be our top priority. And so, like many departments, we went to staggered shifts to promote the maximal safety of our employees and help us ensure that we would be able to continue to provide mobility options to the community. The impact of revenue shortfalls associated with the ridership decreases and decreased sales tax revenue, and also other funding streams. We utilize our COVID-19 funding to increase our cleaning services. We brought in third-party contractors to help us continue to provide the high level of service and confidence for our customers. We instituted midday cleaning of our buses and trains during this time. And then, of course, as all of us were looking during the first several months, the acquisition of personal protective equipment was a top priority. It took us several months as a result of the shortfalls in the supply chain, but by early summer, we were able to provide not only all of our team members, employees, with personal protective equipment, but towards the end of the summer, we were able, through a partnership with Novant Hospital, to provide masks to all of our customers as they wanted, and also to other community members. And so safety and security of our system has been a top priority of our COVID-19 funding. There were also capital expenditures where we removed seats from our vehicles. We put driver partitions in our vehicles to protect our employees, and also protective barriers between seats on our buses and trains to maximize protection of our riding customers. And then there were also necessary facility updates in that regard, following the best data from the CDC on how we maximize safety during this time. Next slide. Of course, we continue to utilize our performance matrix. The CATS tracks performance metrics assigns importance to our scoring. We created multiple levels of performance metrics from an operational standpoint and also a customer standpoint. During that time, we utilized the Net Promoter Score to solicit input from our customers. We survey our customers twice a year, and the last time we were able to survey face-to-face was just prior to the pandemic. In Wave 6, we went out, surveyed our customers on what are the top 10 issues of importance to our customers, and most importantly, how does CATS plan up to each of those areas. Over the 4 years since we've been utilizing this system, our Net Promoter Score continues to rise, and we're actually industry leaders in customer satisfaction. Next slide. Next slide, please. There we are. Thank you. In that regard, you can see over the last 3 years, again, CATS surveys its customers twice a year in the spring and fall. As we have connected with our customers, received the input, acted on that information, you'll see that we have been rewarded by our customers with an increasingly higher level of customer satisfaction over the years. And in the last wave, prior to the pandemic, we were at the highest level over the last several years of 55% of our customers ranked us at the highest level of Net Promoter. The average for the industry is 35%. So we continue to make sure that we are working to drive outcomes for our customers and not just managing outputs. That means that the data that we use, that we track and we act upon, is data that our customer says is important to them rather than just tracking data for data's sake. And when we connect with our customers in that way, that is what also helps us to drive our foundations of our budget activity. Next slide. And so as we've talked about the impacts of the pandemic, of course, in our CATS Tracks scorecard, we've seen the impact that the pandemic has had in some of our more quantifiable areas of performance. Ridership obviously dropped, and so our scorecard reflects that. We did not meet our goals for ridership, and also revenue generated metrics. We did not meet several of our MTC established performance goals. Our goal, each of our metrics is assigned a point value in each of these areas. Our goal is to be 90 out of 100. We only reached 89 last year, but as I mentioned, those were on the quantifiable aspects of our performance metrics focused on ridership and revenue that were directly impacted by the pandemic. We wanted to make sure that we maintained the transparency associated with CATS Tracks, and areas where we don't meet up, we score ourselves accordingly, and that gives us areas to focus on in the future. And so as ridership comes back, we are focusing our efforts on customer confidence, making sure that we are communicating with the public on all of our cleaning activities, the investments we've made in personal protective equipment, not just for employees and riders, but from a system standpoint, and also being good stewards of the public dollar. You will see we'll continue to track our financial performance, how we utilize the CARES funding, and we believe will certainly that will be reflected in our scorecard next year. Next slide. And so looking forward into the FY22 preliminary operating budget we continue with our objectives that haven't changed despite the ongoing impacts of the pandemic. We're presenting a structurally balanced budget that has no fare increases, and we will continue to focus on service delivery and customer confidence. Next slide. And so looking at those results, our preliminary budget summary, our total operating revenue has increased by a little over 6%, from $175 million last year to 181. A lot of that is associated with the anticipated opening of the Gold Line Phase 3. Our expenditures will be in line with that of $181 million. Debt service, of course, is the first priority in our budget, and we will be dealing with $62.1 million in debt service. And our capital budget for FY22 will be $40.5 million, which has gone down significantly from the prior year as we have closed out the Blue Line extension and continue to look towards maintenance of efforts in our capital budget rather than expansion. Next slide. So taking those numbers and looking at a different factor, our operating revenue, our pie chart, sales tax continues to be the largest source of operating revenue. So, and second to that would be our fares and service reimbursement, the actual funds that we receive as a result of the service, the buses, STS, paratransit vehicles, and trains that are on the street each day. There is, of course, the maintenance of effort associated with creation of CATS from all of our member jurisdictions, and then other non-operating sources of funds like grants, et cetera. Looking at our expense side, as usual, personnel services takes up the great majority of our operating budget, and then fuel, maintenance, and other operating expenses. Next slide. Looking at a staffing standpoint, we are standing generally exactly at our same service levels as we were in FY21. We are looking at 579 full-time equivalents. We're adding one member, which is a grant-funded GIS position, and one temporary position. Our contracted positions, which the vast majority of them are associated with our bus operations, we will bring on the same level of 845 full-time equivalents of bus operators, mechanics, and administrative staff, and 108 full-time equivalent for our G4S contracted security officers. Next slide. Looking at our capital program as we've moved from our expansion into more of a state of good repair, that budget has reduced significantly over the prior year, but we'll be focusing on maintenance of effort and state of good repair. We will be replacing fixed route buses. All of our, not all of our, all of this funds will be focused towards state of good repair in regard to our fixed route buses, STS, van poles, and facility and bus shelter improvement. That'll be just under $70 million. Then we will continue with the Silver Line Design and Engineering contract. That was a 3-year program that was funded at $50 million as we moved later this month to moving towards a locally preferred alternative. Next year we will be, which we will bring to the MTC and City Council. In FY22, our focus will be with having a locally preferred alternative. We will begin station planning and design of the corridor. That will be $19.8 million. Then we'll continue to invest in transit safety and security as we replace cameras, shacks, and other hardware and software. We are continuing to invest in the upkeep of the Blue Line. There will be other mobility options. We're looking forward to bringing on an additional park and ride in North Mecklenburg with the construction of the Hambright Park and Ride along I-77, working with the private sector on a new South End station that we are working towards finalizing a public-private partnership to add that additional South End station, and then continuing to invest in ADA improvements throughout our system. And then our non-revenue maintenance vehicles, we will continue to replace those to keep them in a state of good repair, and then upgrading our technology associated with both bus and rail at $5.5 million. Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to address those. Thank you.
So I have to imagine the Mayor Pro Tem has a question.
I do, and I'm just trying to formulate it from a general standpoint, but John, what is the, I guess a couple questions. When do you expect to finalize the locally preferred alternative? And what's your sort of drop dead date for that you have to decide that on that? And then the second question is, how are we, we've talked, and you and I have talked a lot pre-pandemic about wanting to really invest more in our bus system to be able to increase frequency of routes and that kind of thing. Since we haven't taken any major steps to do that, to really put forth a plan that we would cut our headway times in half, where are we with our ability to actually increase route service going forward?
Okay, thank you.
Side.
Sure. I think there were two questions on that were posed. I'll start with the first one in regard to the Silver Line. We are scheduled to bring a staff recommendation to the MTC, and it's April or May meeting. We don't necessarily have a drop dead, a time frame in that. But the longer we take to come to consensus on a locally preferred alternative, that prevents us from going into actual design of the corridor and beginning to finalize to get better costs associated with the corridor. But we are ready to move forward with a staff recommendation. As I mentioned, we'll be bringing that to MTC and City Council and all of our partners along the corridor for consideration within the next month or so. In regard to frequency, obviously that is an important part of the Envision My Ride program, which we implemented in 2018. Just as a reminder, that program is a three-pronged approach to bettering our bus system. We changed the structure of our bus system to move from a hub and spoke to more of a grid system. We believe we got the infrastructure portion right. We're minimizing transfers and providing more direct connects. The second phase, as you mentioned, was an increasing frequency, and we laid forward a plan that will allow us over years to bring all of our routes to no more than 30-minute frequency, with a goal of having as many as possible at 15-minute. The pandemic hit, and that really, with the significant drop in demand, that plan was delayed. But I think during we've had an opportunity as a result of the drop in demand to really be flexible in how we provided our service. And so as an example, by maintaining budget neutral status, we were able to shift resources from service that did not have demand to providing higher frequency, more options to corridors that demand. So as an example, we almost eliminated all of our express service. Many of our routes would have, 8 to 10 trips in the morning and evening. With the significant drop in demand, we dropped that down to one bus each in the mornings and evenings, and shifted those resources to other corridors. And so right now, we have 10 high-frequency corridors that are at 15-minute or better service. And so we've been able to utilize the change in demand to really experiment with how we provide service. One of the other areas that we've seen as a result of the experimenting is we haven't printed a schedule over the last year, and our customers have been very appreciative, and they have responded in a way that we think we can continue to move towards managing headways rather than exact times. What that means is, using a rail example, pre-pandemic, no one really asked for blue line schedules. They just knew that a train was coming every 10 minutes and during peak and every 20 minutes off peak. If we could get that level of reliability on our bus lines, that's what we were trying to prove during this time frame. And so of those 10 lines that we have, headways to make sure we had enough vehicles and service out there to maintain 15-minute frequencies between our vehicles. And that was very well received by customers. And we did not see a level of demand for printed schedules in the past. And so we continue to experiment with our service offerings during the last year. I think we will be looking at a very different type of system as we continue to transition out of the pandemic, one that provides high frequency service on those corridors that have been identified, and we'll continue to work to address the financial needs of moving Envision My Ride forward in the future.
Okay, great. And just a quick last question. Do you have any updates on the app, the real-time app?
Yes, we are moving forward both with the real-time and the mobile payment app. We're still on track for June implementation.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. That's it for me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, I had the app question too. I was afraid there for a second you weren't going to ask it, so well done.
I'd like to keep people in suspense.
Mr. Graham, do you have any questions?
I do. Thank you, John, for the presentation and the good work that you're doing. Two questions in reference to the new streetcar, and I'm excited that that's coming online shortly. I guess the first question is, I had an opportunity, I guess about 2 weeks ago, to meet with members of your security team as well as the security team at Johnson C. Smith in preparation for operations later this year. And we started talking about students' involvement in terms of rides and discount fares, similar to the bus ridership and discount cards that they receive. Is there a way for us to have some conversations with Smith relating to embedding the cost of the service in their tuition? Have you guys started talking with them about that?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And that's a great question. We have been discussing our CATS All Access Pass with Johnson C. Smith, Johnson & Wales, and other institutions along the corridor. We are ready and willing to implement the exact same program that we have with UNC Charlotte. They have that, have been operating since the opening of the Blue Line extension, that exact type of system where just showing their ID allows them full access to all of our rail and our bus services. We'll have to work with the institution on the specifics, the financial specifics of that plan. But as an example, UNC Charlotte has a student transportation fee that is embedded in their annual tuition and other fees that is directed towards this program. That could be something that Johnson C. Smith could implement, or we could work directly with them for other means. But this has been a highly successful program, not just for UNC Charlotte, but also the city offers its employees a similar program, and we're excited about having that partnership with Johnson C. Smith and others along the corridor.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. The last thing we want to do is continually to, not harass, because they have an obligation to pay, and they should pay Smith as well as Johnson and Wales. But students will be students, right? And I think that we can make it easy for them to have access to it and take that off the table. I think that'll be good for everybody involved. So I'm glad that we're going in that direction. Secondly, in terms of once the streetcar is up and operating, what's next in terms of expansion, and how are you guys kind of accounting for that in the budget moving forward?
Yes, sir. So in regard, we're excited about the testing that's going on Gold Line Phase 2 right now. The most important thing as we continue to move forward with the testing is really getting out to the community and talking about the safe operations of streetcar in mixed traffic. So we cannot underestimate the impact of that new technology and its operations along the corridor. Beyond that, we are on the street right now with a procurement for a consulting contract for Gold Line Phase 3. So we're excited to begin the planning and design, the update of the 30% design that was done a number of years ago, so that we can begin to move that program forward. Of course, there's the funding question that we'll have to address at some point, but we have to do the necessary planning work associated with that. And so we hope to have that contractor on by early summer and then move forward with the 30% design for that.
That sounds really great. And again, thank you for all the good work that you're doing. I really enjoyed being with your security team, and we were doing just that, making sure that starting with the students in the university, the proper way to approach the streetcar, cross the street. I mean, those things seem very, very simple. You know, it's very complex too, right? Especially in that neck of the pathway of the streetcar, where it kind of bottles next around that 5-point community. So thank you for your good work, and I look forward to that first ride.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Lewis, I have a couple of questions, and if we could treat this as kind of a lightning round, because I want to keep us on schedule here, but on page 5, where you show your budget for operating revenues, is some of that the federal money that you expect to get? Are you incorporating that into your budget?
Yes,
All
yes.
right.
And
So that's reflected in there.
Yes, sir.
Whatever is eligible, right? I notice also you've got a $120 million 5-year capital program, and you're spending $40 million, if I'm reading this right, in the first year. So are you going to be adequately funded with $80 million over the remaining 4 years of the plan?
Yes, sir. And so the focus of that initial is going to be on replacing vehicles and the battery electric bus pilot.
Right, I see the items here. So, but it's front-loaded quite a bit, right?
It is.
Like you've got the first year, you've got the $40 million, so you're still comfortable that you can kind of accomplish all of these things within the 120, and you have the capacity in your current framework to fund that capital spending from the existing sales tax.
From as sales tax continues to come forward, we have that ability, but also we are also backed by the CARES funding that we have received.
Understood, but you're not counting on, because the different subject is the mobility plan, and so for this $120 million, you're not counting on the mobility plan.
No, sir.
All right. So, but the mobility plan is involved in the funding for Gold Line Phase 3 and for some of the bus improvements. That was going to be part of or is part of the mobility plan. Is that right?
Gold Line Phase 3 is the entire Gold Line is a city-funded project.
Understood.
And so what funding sources the city has used for that, I don't know what that source may be, so maybe Ryan will.
Yeah, so you guys have all heard PAYGO. We also have PAYGO Transit, which is made up of revenue from a portion of the You Drive It tax and then motor vehicle licenses. And then that helps fund both the city's maintenance of effort agreement with CATS and then also the Gold Line operations that we've done. Separate from that, in the past, we paid for the capital aspects of the Gold Line with city dollars from our regular debt service fund.
Understood, but now in talking about our mobility plan, there is reference to the gold line as the blue line, the gold line, the red line, and so on. And I'm assuming that 6 more miles of streetcar is going to cost a few $100 million. So are we relying to some extent on the realization of the mobility plan to fund the gold line? Or are we assuming that there will be money other than the mobility plan sales tax?
So with our local dollars that we've been planning, where we've been putting bond scenarios and certificates of participation scenarios, we do not have the gold line factored into that 5-year plan at this time. So right now, the step would be for Mr. Lewis to hire a consultant to work on the 30% design. And then at that point, there would need to be a funding strategy from one of the buckets if we were to move forward.
But one possible funding strategy is that if we realize the 1 cent sales tax, that some of that money would be available for gold line,
Correct.
right? Okay. We had a pilot project on Central Avenue that ended. It was controversial. So what did you take away from all that?
Sure, great question, Mr. Chair. So the third phase of Envision My Ride is reliability. If we've gotten the structure right and we're adding more frequent service, but if that service is stuck in the same traffic jams that everyone else is stuck in, we still haven't solved the reliability problem. So we were examining different technological ways that we can bring the kind of reliability that rail has to our bus system. Bus-only lanes is one of those opportunities that we can utilize along with queue jumpers, which allows a bus to jump ahead of a queue of vehicles at intersections and go through the intersection, but also signal priority. So the bus will communicate with the intersection signals and allows us to continue on. But the single biggest reliability factor is the utilization of bus-only lanes. We tried that, used that. It worked very well on 4th Street. And we were able to quantify the cost, the time savings associated with that, but 4th Street did not have the level of traffic volume and the length of the project at Central Avenue. Central Avenue was an ambitious project, but it gave us 2 things in that were the goal of that pilot project. Number 1, trying the bus-only lane and getting the interaction, even though there was less traffic during that time, but really we were able to quantify the time savings that a bus-only lane would provide us for all of our buses. And we saw almost a 20% increase in time and reliability. So that gives us good information for other corridors we may want to look at. Second, and very important as it relates to the Gold Line, Phase 3, is Phase 3 will take this from a 4-mile project to over a 10-mile project. It will take the Gold Line from a urban circulator to more of a commuting project. We will not be looking just for, as we do with Phase 1 and 2, people who are coming from school to work or from meeting to meeting within the uptown area. We're looking to attract commuters who are coming from home into uptown, et cetera. And so really the most important thing is time savings along a corridor. If we operate Phase 3 like we do now for 10 miles, it will take hours for that vehicle to get from one end of the line to the other, and we will not be able to quantify the travel savings for commuters along that corridor. So experimenting with a transit-only lane gave us some information that we can apply to the update of Gold Line Phase 3 of how we could achieve time savings along that corridor as we move to Phase 3.
Okay, I can tell you as a member of the Transportation Committee and from a council perspective, the local response to that pilot project, as I say, it was controversial. So I hope there were some things we learned from it in terms of how we think about going about implementing a single lane strategy. Last question was, Are you taking any initiatives in yield management this year?
I'm sorry,
Yield management. You know, in the past, we've seen that the fare structures were adjusted in order to change the yield.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we have continued to look for opportunities. We actually have a consultant study that is ongoing, that is taking a look at our entire fare structure, and we'll be providing recommendations probably within the next month or two on that. We're looking at things like fare capping, et cetera, what other reductions and changes to our fare structure that will provide not just a more equitable fare structure, but one that also maximizes revenue.
So nobody is going to be paying more as a result of a yield management initiative?
At this point, in this budget, there is no fare increase associated with that. As I look at the recommendations from this fare study, we'll certainly come back and explain those, but I don't anticipate there, certainly not in FY22, but I don't anticipate that there will be great shifts in our fare structure.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have anything else? If not, let's go on to Mr. Wood.
Chair?
Yes.
I just forgot to say to John, congratulations on your ratings and your passenger reviews. That's a big feat, and I appreciate that you guys and that your team has worked so hard on that.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. It was a team effort.
And could you convey to your team council's appreciation for all their work during COVID? Did call for above and beyond kind of risk-taking and service, and we appreciate it.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks a lot. Next on the agenda is aviation. Aviation. So do we have, Haley, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Hi, how are you?
Good to be with you this afternoon. Good afternoon, council members. Let's jump right in to our presentation in the interest of time. Okay. I'm going to call your attention to a couple of facts on this chart. If you look on the far left, that column represents now. One of the numbers I'd like to share with you is the 76,000 daily passengers. This year we have ended for the calendar year our passenger count at 27 million. So how does that compare to normal? Well, if you look over in the middle column, you will see the 2019 statistics, and you will see that we ended 2019 with 50 million passengers. I think this is a great infographic that really clearly shows you what's happened in our environment. I think there's a lot more to tell behind this image, and I look forward to sharing that with you. But we have taken a tremendous hit with our passengers. We are much better off than many of our counterparts throughout the country, and 27 million passengers is nothing to sneeze at. However, it is a dramatic departure from where we were in 2019. Nevertheless, you can check out our economic impact numbers. The state recently updated those. Charlotte was responsible for 4% of the state's gross GDP. And aviation in general made up about 10%, so that helps give you some perspective of where we are. Next slide, please. So let's zero in on exactly what we've been doing during this time and where we're going moving forward with the budget. Very early on during the COVID crisis, we established 4 priorities. Those included sustaining the airport operation, protecting our employees, committing to our investors, or ensuring our commitment to our investors, rather, and supporting our business partners. And I am very pleased to say we've been able to do all of those things extremely successfully during this period of time. We have been able to meet the needs of our tenants, and even though operations are reduced, they are continuing to flow through Charlotte at a growing pace. We have been able to maintain all of our employees, which is not the situation at other airports throughout our state and many airports throughout our country. We've maintained our bond covenants and our debt service coverage, and recently just asked that all of our rating agencies reaffirm our ratings. It was a great story to tell, and we believe we'll be successful in that. And most importantly, we've been able to support our partners by working together creatively and implementing strategies during this time period that help sustain operations. So moving forward, the 2022 budget is very similar to the 2021. We are maintaining a very flat budget. Although our priorities are not changing, you will see some growth, but it will not impact the budget. We've reduced discretionary spending, we've deferred certain capital projects, and we have been able to strategically apply our federal stimulus grants to help us during this time. We are seeing some increased flight activity, as I mentioned, although you will not see a tremendous impact to the budget. It is pretty much status quo. Next slide, please. I think this is a great pictorial view of what's going on in our country right now. These are available airline seats from April 2019 through March 2020. And you will see that Charlotte has retained almost two, or not almost, but we've retained 2 out of every 3 seats, pre-pandemic seats. And it has us as the 4th busiest airport in the country right now, based on seat availability and capacity. In March, American went to 650 daily departures. Pre-pandemic, they operated anywhere from 700 to 715, depending on the month. And this May, they will increase once again to 665 departures. So we are back in terms of capacity. What is not there yet is the load factor. And we are watching that, and depending on the day of the week or whether it's a holiday week, that continues to ebb and flow. But I think this really adds national perspective to the conversation that we're having. I also think that it really shows that American has doubled down on Charlotte, and they've really committed verbally. You've heard them, you've probably read it. They are committed to Charlotte and DFW in this time period, and they continue to reiterate that to this day, and I think this shows that. Next slide, please. These are the nitty-gritty details of our budget, but as mentioned, what you will see here is we're flat for the most part as we are going into 2022. This chart will also show you that we have taken a significant hit in revenues. The local passenger is just not back yet. We do have a large number of connecting passengers, but we are not where we need to be specifically with regard to airport parking. Food and beverage has also taken a hit. Although most of our units are open and functioning, we are learning that passengers have new buying trends. The breakfast segment, for example, is just not something that people are embracing yet. So we are really trying to reinvent and figure out how we capture those dollars. Good news is you will see that we are expecting significant growth in our revenues next year, and that is based on the increased travel that you're seeing coming through. This budget also includes 6 additional positions. I will tell you that these are positions that are already in our midst that we are paying for. They are known as overhires. These were trainees that we brought on. This was one of Brent Cagle's ideas that he implemented. And we had, I believe, 10 that we started with, 10 or 12 that we started with. And we wound up having 6 that made it through the entire program. These are at-risk employees who were specifically selected for this job. They were trained on the site, and then they made it through their trainee period and were hired into full-time positions. This has been a great program. It was not a fit for everyone who started the program. There are other city departments who do similar things, but this was the first time aviation had ventured into that area. So you'll see that those 6 positions are making those individuals full-time. You'll see a few highlights, percentage highlights at the bottom of the screen there. The 5.4% to city services, I will tell you, those are increases that are to cover fire and police salaries. And I've already talked to you about the personnel services. So overall, this is flat, as I mentioned. Okay, so how do those costs translate to the airlines? CPE, this is a term you're familiar with, you've heard before. We're proud of this chart. We've shown it for many, many years, but you will see that these are large hubs throughout the nation. You will see Chicago is in the far left and Charlotte is in the far right. This represents what it costs per implaned passenger for the airlines to operate here. And this figure on this chart is representative of about $2.26. So how do we do that? You saw the numbers on the other sheet. Probably one of the most significant things that we've been able to use to support this initiative, other than good fiscal responsibility, is the CARES funding that has come through. So we have continued to apply that as needed to meet our deficits with revenue and to maintain our low-cost structure. Initially, we received about $135 million in CARES funding, and we have an estimate of $150 million for round 3. I will tell you, though, we do not know the parameters of the round 3 funds yet. I think they're actually calling American Recovery Funds, but we are hopeful that the FAA will get those parameters and guidance to us very soon. We've spent the COVID money, as I said, to supplement our budget on COVID-related items. We've established all types of graphics, information materials, sanitizing stations, MERV filters in our HVAC units in the terminal building, all types of UV lighting on moving walkways, screens for our shuttle bus drivers when they're driving. The list goes on for things that we've used it for. Next slide. And to round out the budget exercise this year, we were asked to complete an equity in services analysis. And this was something we were really excited about because it ties back to one of our 6 strategic principles. The one particular it applies to is valuing employees. And so we wanted to share with you a few highlights from that. I won't read everything on the page to you in the interest of time, but we do have 4 focus areas, and that's in community engagement, culture and engagement within our organization, airport civil rights, and workforce development. And we have all of the standard programs which you are familiar with, CBI, ADA, ACDBE, limited English proficiency. But we also have some things you may not be familiar with that are highlighted here. The airport recently hired a culture and diversity manager. We're very excited about that. We have over 600 employees here, and it is a great opportunity, we think, about engaging our employees in various conversations and ensuring that we are providing a culturally diverse and equitable work environment. We are establishing employee affinity groups. We have a group called Women in Aviation, and we hope to have another group very soon that focuses on our culture specifically. I mentioned to you the trainee program under workforce development. We've had a workforce development manager for some time, and she's very ingrained in our community. We have apprenticeships, internships, and then the trainee program, which we will implement a new trainee program this year in partnership with Solid Waste to help train shuttle bus drivers. We'll work with Solid Waste to complete CDL training. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have with regard to this specifically or anything else I've discussed.
Thank you,
That's all I
Haley.
have.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, any questions?
Haley, first of all, thank you very much for the presentation. I guess I have more of a comment than a question, and this is not, you guys are doing a great job of managing through a difficult situation. But I hope that at some point we can have a conversation about pure equity out at the airport. When you're talking about this equity in service, you're really referring to 600 people that work directly for the airport, I'm assuming. But the fact is there's what, 18 or 20,000 people employed in the airport, in the context of the entire airport. And so when we do things like this, I'm not really sure we are helping the people that might need it most. We continue to get approached by the unions on behalf of workers that are out there on hot tarmacs that are still, we've had, when we were all meeting live, we've had employees of the contractors come and talk about how they've been there 15 years and they're still making $8.60 an hour. And the bottom line is we keep saying we can't do anything about it because they're not our employees. But you all have a very big platform to work with your contractors to say, you got to do better. You got to pay people. I mean, when we really sit down and think about it, it's the size of a town, the amount of people that work at the airport. And I don't know. I appreciate that you're doing this for the 600, but again, that's like 0.04% of the entire workforce out at the airport. And I think there's a little bit of room there. I realize we're the cheapest of all of those cities to operate an airport, but that tells me there's a little bit of wiggle room there to pay people better. And I think our council has to have a conversation with you guys about what's the best way to go about doing that. We don't want to become the most expensive airport. And we have to look at who our competitors are. And I see Atlanta was right above us. But it does tell me that there is some room for opportunity there that we can treat people better. And I'd like to see that be part of our conversation when you get past the worst of the severe problems that you've been dealing with the pandemic.
I understand. I will tell you that we are establishing relationships with different people within these organizations who are focused on the same conversation that we're having about culture and diversity. So we talk to the airlines all the time, don't get me wrong, but they're, enormous entities and you're focused on certain areas. This is not really something that we have dug into at this grassroots kind of level. Most of the time it is coming from the outside or at your level of communication with the larger organization. So I've made a note here, and I do think there's an opportunity there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not for culture and diversity. It's pay and it's work conditions, and that transcends all, conditions that's for all workers. So yep. I think the conversations we really have got to start having. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, I would just comment on that. Having worked on the working group for the airport, a lot of these employees are parties to collective bargaining agreements, in some cases national. So we have to be a little bit sensitive to what other cities might think about anything that we do to change the terms of those negotiations. And also, I would just mention, for us to be making a big push in this area where the airlines are still reeling from COVID and would not appreciate any increase in their cost per enplaned passenger, and the timing may not be right to try and fix this. It's just an observation of mine, but
yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman and Mayor Pro Tem, one thing that I will add is when we start to discuss employee pay as it relates to an airline employee, for example, or an HMS host employee, or even an LSG Skychefs employee who is a contractor of the airlines, the costs associated with those employees' pay is not part of the cost per enplaned passenger. Cost per enplaned passenger reflects the costs associated with the airport, what the airport or the aviation department pays in the form of expenses to provide the platform, if you will. If you think about the airport, the runways and the terminal as an operating platform for businesses, airlines specifically, to conduct their business, the cost per enplaned passenger reflects the costs associated with the aviation department to provide that platform. And then it's divided out, and the users of the airport pay us for that. And so the cost per enplaned passenger, if American Airlines, for example, or HMS Host or LSG Sky Chefs decided to give all of their employees an across-the-board raise in Charlotte, that would not move the cost per enplaned passenger at all, because that is not an aviation department cost. And so while I understand your point, I do want to clarify that when we talk about cost per enplaned passenger, those kinds of costs associated with a tenant, right? I won't say a contractor to the airport, a tenant of the airport are not inherently they're not part of the CPE.
And so.
Thank you, Brent, for that distinction. That's a very good point.
And
Thank you.
the point is that
Claire.
if people look and see that our cost per enplaned passenger is very low, that is not on the backs of the employees of these contractors.
That is correct, sir.
All right. Mr. Graham?
Mr. Chairman.
I didn't hear that. No questions?
No questions, I'm good.
Thank you. I just wanted to note, to highlight, it looks to me, if I'm reading this right, as if we actually had a 10% reduction in cost per enplaned passenger in 2022 versus pre-COVID. Is that the right conclusion? 236 down to 212, which is interesting. I'm wondering if, as we proceed through our very large, I think, what is it, $5 billion total capital plan, is that number going to go up? I mean, we've managed to keep the number down by basically being underinvested in facilities, is my interpretation. And now we're addressing that. So are we expecting the cost per plane passenger to go up as we incur additional debt to realize our capital plan?
Yes, sir. We are anticipating that it will increase. This is something we have been talking about with the airlines. Keep in mind their long-term lease and use agreement actually allows them a seat at the table, and they have what we refer to as an MII approval process, which means they are approving when any large capital infrastructure projects, and they are accepting that as in return to become part of their rate base. So they do know it will go up. Of course, we are monitoring that as we move forward, but it will not come as a surprise that goes up to some degree.
And they're actually in favor of that because they want the experience of their passengers to improve. I mean, the airport has been very crowded. So if there are no other questions, thank you very much for that. The airport, as always, is a jewel in the crown of Charlotte, and we appreciate how well it's run. Thanks, Haley.
Thank you.
The next item we have is our debt financing calendar update with Kelly Flannery, our Chief Financial Officer. Go
Appreciate
for
it.
it.
Thank you. Wendy, if you can pull up the slide, I think we're going to make up some time on this one. So just as a reminder, the city issues bonds to fund capital. We do that across all of the credits of the city. So I have a lot coming in the next couple weeks at city council agenda meetings, and I just wanted to kind of remind everyone we're sticking with the plan, but don't be surprised. So here's a quick overview. Right now, the city is about $4.3 billion in outstanding debt. We have a metric where we try and stay below 85% fixed, 15% variable, so we're well within that benchmark. And as you might expect, the enterprise funds is really where the bulk of our outstanding debt lives. Next slide. And this is just a kind of a report card on all of the council actions that were approved last year. I find all of this really fascinating. I can go through any detail on this chart you want to. I guess this is kind of the proof of life slide. We actually did what we said we were going to do. We got really aggressive low interest rates. We were able to attract the existing investors as well as new investors, which is always attractive. You know, when you're issuing debt, the more people that are interested in you, the lower the yield. So it's good news. Next slide. And so far this year, we've only done 2 deals, which is kind of a good news story. In the world of a pandemic, interest rates were really low, so we were able to take advantage of that. We did the water and sewer refunding as well as a stormwater revenue deal. And then the next slide. Just wanted to flag for you because you're going to be seeing a lot of me over the next 3 months or so at council. Because of the pandemic and the public hearing requirement, each RCA for a bond transaction requires 3 meetings now. So we're going to be bringing a lot. So we're going to, if you remember, you approved the airports, the final of the 3rd time I was there, last council meeting. We're going to price that deal in about 2 weeks. We'll bring a water sewer ban, convention center ban, transit refunding bond, and then later in the year, we'll be back for water sewer, COPS, and GEO. So with that, I just wanted to, set the stage that I'm coming, but if anyone has any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Hearing none, I'll just comment that I find this stuff really exciting as well.
That's
and I
for you.
appreciate the transparency. And I think the best way for us to look at this is we authorize capital budgets, and this is the sort of backstage of the capital budget. So, for example, the municipal debt here relates mainly to our CIP. Is that fair?
That's correct. That would be the GEO and the COPS.
Right, right. And then we see in our budget process the capital plans for the airport and for the enterprise funds, and this is just the debt related to it. So the bottom line is we are on track with things that we have agreed to do in terms of the debt we're incurring. And we are not incurring debt to fund operations.
Oh, no.
Okay,
That was my old job.
thank you. And we've got, that's right. Mention where you worked before. Chicago, right? Yeah, right. Okay. No jokes about
I like that.
Chicago in this meeting, please.
I like how you
Yes. Last item then, Mr. Ryan, the budget workshop agenda.
Yeah, and this is just one slide, if we could bring that up, Wendy. So the last 2 times before the workshop, we've showed you the draft agenda ahead of time to kind of get your informal blessing. This will be our last workshop before my staff and myself will really hunker down and put this thing together for I believe, May 3rd. It's either May 3rd or May 4th, proposed budget. So the things that we have on the agenda, Safe Charlotte will be the probably the biggest component. So it's going to be a budget update, and Julia Martin's going to come and talk a little bit about where we are on the recommendations that City Council unanimously approved last October. And we'll also have Chief Jennings and Federico on hand as well to give an update on each of those 6 recommendations. Then I'm going to talk about public safety enhanced compensation year 3. So those of you who have been here a few years remember that about 3 years ago we had a multi-year strategy where we were going to boost top pay for our public safety employees. This upcoming budget will be primarily focused on fire because if you recall, fire had a 3-year strategy and police had a 2-year strategy. So I'll talk about that. Third, we will talk about financial partner applications. Marie will give a presentation, but if you'll notice last week, we did give you the financial partner applications a little bit earlier this year, a few weeks ahead of time. And the intention for that is that we don't spend a lot of time at the workshop going application by application. It'll be more of a brief presentation, and then you guys can talk about any support or any questions that you have on those applications. And then finally, CATS and aviation, similar to what we did with water and stormwater. They'll present kind of a condensed version for the entirety of City Council, and you guys can ask questions there. And on this final workshop, we'll try to turn around any questions you may have in a couple of weeks so we can focus on the proposed budget. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you for any questions.
This is our last one, right?
This is our last one.
This is the last budget workshop. Any questions? Deafening silence, no questions. Good presentation. And with that, I think we're done. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn. And I hear a unanimous consent on the motion to adjourn. So we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.